All right, so let's talk about making content more visually appealing. And in this particular section, we're talking about how to make that boring HTML look a little better to the eye, because as you've already noticed, basic HTML oftentimes produces fairly ugly results when it comes to web design. So when we think about the power of visuals, the brain processes images 60,000 times faster than text. So it makes sense when you stop and think about it why Instagram is so popular these days, because we prefer images, right? It doesn't mean we don't read anymore, but stop and think about your own Instagram tendencies. How many of you actually read the captions on Instagram rather than focusing on the images there? So images can tell a story. There's that old saying that an image is worth 1,000 words. Uh, a great image or great visuals can help tell that story that you're trying to tell. And then there's this data that show that web pages with images or video generally draw 94% more views than text only pages. Think of your own personal preferences when you're going to sites. Text is obviously important, but we want strong visuals to go along with it to keep us interested and active on the site. So here's a look at Amazon, for instance. This was Amazon's very first website, which is quite ugly, and it's just text and links, right? So when you think back to that Web 1.0 that we talked, this was a very common site on Web 1.0. But nowadays, we expect beauty on sites, especially with brands that we associate with beauty. So, for instance, Apple, fans, myself included, tend to prefer Apple because it's sleek and the products themselves are oftentimes very pretty. It would make sense that when you go to the website, it as well is a sleek, well-designed experience to have that. So let's experiment with some really ugly um, design choices here. And that sounded weird when I said that. Design choices. There we go. Here is a very basic web page. So you can see we have the HTML tag open. We close the HTML tag. We've got the head. We're missing a title in here, so keep that in mind. But we have added a little bit of style to this. So we're now going to be moving on from just plain HTML to another language, which is called CSS, or stands for Cascading Style Sheets. And there are multiple ways to add style to a page. Um, and I'll go through those in an upcoming lecture or upcoming video. But the way we're going to be handling it for this assignment is just adding some style to the head. So here's how style works when you're actually making or adding style to a page. This is the tag that it'll apply to. So we're telling it we want the entire body for this to be the style of that. Background color is the first property, so CSS uses property and values, whereas in HTML, in tags, they're attributes and values. Okay, so please get that terminology down. The background color is this color, which we'll see what that is here in a second. The text color is red, so you're noticing some differences here between attributes and values and properties and values. The wording is a little bit different. You're not expected to memorize all this stuff. You can look it up. How do I change text color in CSS? It will tell you to use color, colon, and then whatever value you want. And notice here, sentences in style end in a semicolon, okay? So font family, we're saying to use Comic Sans, which you can already probably see a problem there. And then we've aligned everything in the center. So we have a header, we have a paragraph, we have an image, and we've got some text. So let's take a look at that site, and we have some problems, right? First of all, this isn't a good image to use because this is a site about me, and I've got an image of like 20 people here. So that's a problem. We've got this Comic Sans font, which is horrible. It's centered, which is horrible. And then we haven't even gone into the color scheme, which looks like Christmas, right? We've got kind of this lime green background and red font. So when you stop and think about it, yeah, that's pretty bad. So let's start first with the image. And one change we can make right off the bat is just by picking a different image. This one's much better. It focuses on me. I actually talk about Lucy and where I travel, so it makes sense that this is a travel photo. It's a little big, so I will say that. We could resize that a little bit, but just in and of itself, we've already made a major change. So we're going to walk through some design considerations here. And the first consideration is color. And I've already introduced the idea of the RGB scale or hex codes. Um, don't worry so much about CMYK. That's actually what we use for print. For digital on the web, we're using the RGB scale. So remember, when you have a hex code, it's 6 digits, anywhere from 00 to FF. The first 2 are red, the middle 2 are green, the middle 3 are blue, or the last 3 are blue. Okay, so for instance, white is full of all color, so it'd be FF, FF, FF. Black is void of any color, so it'd be 00, 00, 00. If you wanted pure red, it would be FF 0000. Green would be 00 FF 00, and blue would be 0000 FF. Okay, you don't have to memorize hex codes. Again, you can find them anywhere on the web. You'll probably get to know just those 5 because you're going to be using them quite often, and they're the easiest to know. If you go to Photoshop or Pixlr or anything like that, you can load images and actually pick part of the color, and it will give you the hex code. So you can see this particular shade of blue right here is 1AB2CO. So you have plenty of tools on the web to help you find these things. We do not expect you to memorize all those numbers. When you are thinking about colors to use on your site, a nice little pro tip is to just choose 2. And if you start thinking about brand logos or brand color schemes, a lot of them do just have 2 colors. So for instance, FedEx is this kind of purplish and orange color, but they also use white space here with the white here between the E and the X as an arrow pointing forward. Airbnb really only has 1 main color, but they use white so much that you would say the main colors are this pink and white because it's using the white space there for the logo. And then Nike has always been black and white. So it's either a black background with the white swoosh or a white background with the black swoosh. So just pick 2. Keep it simple. Not stupid, but keep it simple, student, when you're coming up with color schemes. One of the biggest problems we see with both website design and with this initial HTML assignment is that students tend to go crazy with the colors, when in reality, keeping it simple and finding a color scheme is the best thing you can do. So for instance, let's say I like this blue and this orange, and I want to make them my main colors. Well, I can fill out that color scheme by using either tints or shades of those colors. So you can see here, there's a grayish and then a white, dark gray, and a black. Okay, so this is just some color terminology. Here's that kind of baseline blue. If I'm adding a tint to that color, I'm making it lighter and lighter and lighter to where it eventually becomes white. And if I'm adding shade to that color, I'm adding black until it eventually gets to black. Okay, so just keep that in mind as you're thinking about colors. Tinting is making it lighter, shading is making it darker. And fortunately, we have a lot of free tools available on the web to find color schemes. So one that I prefer using is Adobe Color CC. Just do a Google search for it and it'll take you right to the page. I'll walk you through this in an upcoming video where we'll actually pick a color scheme. But let's say we like this one right here. So here's a color scheme of some tans getting up to kind of a light brown, and then we've got a blue and kind of an off gray right there. So you should notice down here you have the hex codes for all of these colors. So it makes it easy for you to find the colors that you're looking for, and to find colors that, more importantly, complement each other and will work well together on a page. So if I go into the style of that really ugly site that we, or a really ugly page that we were working on, I've now added this FFDEC6 as the background color, and I've changed the font color to black. And just from that one change, we've already made a massive difference. But one thing you'll notice here, this looks a little different than what I thought it was going to look like. It's a little peachier than I was really wanting. So when I go back to the color scheme, I might actually want to use this tan because it's a little lighter than this, and I think it might look more off-putting than this kind of peachy color, even though it doesn't necessarily look like it here. On the page it did. So if I change this, I prefer this tan a little bit better. So we're well on our way to making a difference on this page. We've changed the background color and changed the font color. Size is another very big consideration when you're working with web design. So several different things where size would come into play. One is font size. The other is size of images. Those are probably the two biggest things that you'll look at. So when you look at sites like GoPro or something like that, big bold images and big bold fonts and text. So when you stop and think about code, this is probably an H1, right? And this might be like an H4 or an H5. So take advantage of those opportunities to add big images and big fonts, but that only works in certain situations, right? GoPro, this fits their brand. To have an image going all the way across the screen, it probably won't be for you. I already talked about how that one image I picked was a little bit big. So don't go crazy with the images. It needs to fit the specific look that you're going for. So here's how we can add some size considerations to style. So you can see here on the left-hand side, I kind of have the normal default style settings for H1s and Ps, which would be paragraphs. 16 pixels. Font style is italics or not. So you can see it's normal, not italic, not italicized. Font weight would either be normal or bold. So we have it bold. And then text duration would either be none or underlined. And then paragraph, same thing, but we have it as 12 pixels. So let's bump that up some. So this is our new style over here. H1s, we're going to make 32 pixels, which is twice as big as we originally had it. And then paragraphs, we're keeping everything the same. So because everything else was the same and I'm only changing that one, I'm now adding in a new tag right here, or a new tag consideration. And then the curly brackets, which is what we use in style. Font size is the property for that. And then value is the 32 pixels. And then again, I have that semicolon there to end that. So when we go to the site, you can now see our H1s are quite big, even though they're still Comic Sans. We're making them bigger. And again, I talk about this image being too big. I'd probably like it to be about 60% of that. So I could go in and make that change as well. Okay, so we're making progress on getting this site better. Readability would be the next big thing to consider, and this is where fonts come into play. So we have two main types of font, either sans serif fonts or serif fonts. Serif fonts have these little accentuations or flourishes on the end of them, whereas sans serifs do not have those. So when you think about which ones we typically use, we use serif fonts, again, with the flourishes on them for printed material. And on the web, we typically use sans serif. We don't want those flourishes. So it makes sense that Times New Roman is usually the default setting on a lot of print functions because it's a serif font, whereas we want something sans serif like Arial or Helvetica or one of those fonts as well. So let's stop and talk for just a second about ugly or unique fonts. One, I would advise you very strongly to not use anything like this. I mean, here you can't even tell what these letters are. But when you use a crazy font, somebody has to have that font downloaded on their computer for it to actually work when they're viewing your file, So keep that in mind. If you're picking a crazy font, chances are they're probably not going to be able to see it because they probably don't have it. So really stick to the main fonts, and your user will have a much better experience when it comes to that. So Comic Sans is unfortunately a pretty common font, so we would know that people would probably see that. But I just make one simple change, changing it to Arial, and you can see it already made a huge difference just getting rid of that Comic Sans. I'm very happy, yes, thank goodness that we got rid of Comic Sans. So put some thought into fonts, but really, it's best to pick amongst those three, either Arial, Verdana, Helvetica, or any sans serif. You can go through the list, but the more common, the better when it comes to picking fonts. Then we have proximity, which is just simply how close are things to each other. So you can see here we have this H1, but it's directly halfway between both of those paragraphs. So Yes, it's probably related to the one coming after it, but there's a way we can make that better. And if you go in here to this style, we start introducing things like padding and margin. So I know y'all know what margins are. Margins are the exterior edge of a page or of a document or anything like that. So just think when you have a 5-page paper due and you're only at 2 pages and you're tempted to change the margins to 4 inches to push everything in. Same thing with web design. Margins are the exterior edges of that. Most importantly, we're going to be dealing with padding, which is actually space around specific content. Okay, so this could be an image, it could be a paragraph, it could be a header. All of those things, you can add padding on all 4 sides. So padding right, padding top, padding left, padding bottom, in terms of creating space with that image. So if I get rid of the padding top on this paragraph and get rid of the padding bottom on headers, it will change that to this now, to where now these and this one up here are more closely, they have a much closer proximity to the actual paragraph that we're trying to have them associated with. So again, I did that by removing padding at the top of paragraphs and at the bottom of headers. But one thing that that you might not always be pleased with the results, because I got rid of that padding at the top, it now pushed the image all the way down to the paragraph, and I want a little bit of space with that. So I can add some padding bottom in an image within your style of just 5 pixels, and that will go from that to that. Okay, so it just pushed the image up a little bit, and that way there's at least some space here. So padding goes around all 4 sides of any whatever content you have on your page. So this is an H1, this is a paragraph, this is an image, a paragraph, an H1, a paragraph. You can go in and change the padding on all 4 sides, whether it's padding top, padding left, padding bottom, or padding right. And that will affect the space going around those. And then the final consideration to talk about is just simply alignment. So we have centered text, which is not typically how we want to read text on the web. We want things to be aligned left because we read from left to right. So changing that align center to align left presents a much better experience over here. But you can see we have some problems where the image is not lined up with the text here. And there's a reason why, because if we go and look on paragraphs, we have some padding left. Okay, so that would be right here. There's that padding. And on H1s, we also have some padding left. So that's why the H1 is pushed in. So a couple of different ways we could do that. One, we could either get rid of this padding and that would align everything up, but then everything would be pushed to the left-hand side and we might want that space there. So the better option would be to add padding left to the image to get it pushed over as well. So we'll go from that to that, getting rid of everything, or we could add padding to the image and push everything over. Okay, so is that clear? Let me just go back so we can see examples. This is with all the padding. So padding left on a paragraph, padding left on a header. We have no padding left on the image. So if I get rid of those paddings in the style, it pushes everything over. If you wanted that space, which I probably would prefer, I would want to have padding left, 15 to 20 pixels on the header, 15 to 20 pixels on paragraphs, and on the image as well. And that will push everything over. One last thing, we have this color scheme, but we really only use this one color right here. So let's add a second color and think about places where you can add these colors in. So we have this particular color, and we might want to change something like the header to this color. So just going into the style and changing color on H1, you can add that particular hex code, and now we've worked in another color of our color scheme. And again, making it a little bit more pleasing to the eye when it comes to that. So we've come a long way. We started here and we got to here. So again, this is still not a beautiful site or a page by any means, but making some really simple changes with CSS can add quite a bit of flair, or at least make it pleasing to the eye to where you're not embarrassed to show somebody the file that you've created. So again, we get the Mountain Man nod of approval there working on this project. So here's all the style that we added. If we go back and look at the actual code, so we have the style tag. In the body, we wanted the background color to be that lightish tan color. We have the font color is black, and Arial is going to be the main font. If they don't have Arial, then they'll use sans serif. Remember, in style, we have these curly brackets that open and close around all of that, and the sentences end with semicolons. For our paragraphs, we want the font size to be 16. We want no padding at the top and no margin at the top as well. Other than that, it's just a normal font. For the headers, we wanted it to be that kind of bluish color. They're going to be 32 pixels and bold. And again, we got rid of all padding. And then at the image, the only padding we have is at the bottom because we wanted to separate that image from the text or from the paragraph below it. Okay, so you should be able to walk through this style and kind of envision in your mind what it's going to look like, because this is pretty standard or pretty common in terms of some quick little style changes. So just a reminder, CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet. It goes in the head and it controls the style and layout of your page. You have all of these properties that you can use, and believe me, there are hundreds of more. So you're not expected to memorize these. These are some of the more common ones, but use those resources like W3 Schools or somewhere like that where you can go in and look up specific properties for CSS and then start making the changes that you'll want to make to your page. Remember, CSS goes in the head. You'll use the style tag. You'll close the style tag. Inside of that style tag, you'll have the curly brackets going with each section of the site that you're trying to affect with that style. So here again is just one more look at what it is. We have the style tag open. You're probably going to notice it will add, if you're using Sublime, it's going to add this text equals text/CSS. This is just telling the browser that this is CSS. You don't necessarily need that. Here's the tag in the HTML that it's going to affect. So it's the body tag that it's going to affect. We have that curly bracket and the closed curly bracket. Font family here in this case would be Arial, then Helvetica, then Tahoma, then sans serif. We want the font to be white and the background color to be black. Black and white you can get away sometimes by only having the first three because it's 000000 or FF. But it never hurts to just add the others. So remember, these are properties, these are values within style. Design is not the whole enchilada, okay? Design matters, but honestly, voice matters just as important, or the content that's actually on the page. So we put up with a lot of really ugly sites because the content matters to us. Think about Craigslist. Craigslist is about the ugliest site out there, but we use it because it's so useful. So yes, design matters, it's important, but if the content you have on the site is not good, you could have the prettiest site in the world, but people aren't going to want to use it because the content's bad. So having that nice balance of good design and good content is really where you want to go. I've mentioned some of these resources. W3 Schools, by far the best resource that I would recommend for you out there. When you start Googling some of the problems you're having, the first link is probably going to be a W3 Schools link. So you can go on there, find all the CSS properties that you would need. So just to recap, what language controls the structure and content? That would be HTML. What language controls the style and layout? That would be CSS. And where does 99% of your content go? That goes in the body. So coming up, I'll have another demo walking you through CSS. We'll actually be applying it to that really basic page that we just created. And we'll walk through the process of adding some style and getting you more familiar and comfortable around using style.